Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 960. I started off here with d4. My opponent went b6, the English defense. He didn't show how to play this in the best light. So if you're interested in the English defense, which actually is a playable and interesting opening, you could go over to Chess Explained's channel. He's played this a number of times, and so if you just search for English defense on his channel, you'll find a number of examples of how black could play this. He often goes with the idea of bishop here on this diagonal. Obviously, that's part of the plan, but also with pawns on e6 and f5, helping to control the light squares, kind of a positional approach. And it looks a bit like a Dutch defense after you get that pawn to f5, and then the knight can come out to f6 behind the pawn. So anyway, interesting play for black there. That's not what black did in this game. And let's see, the other thing Chess Explained says about the English defense is he prefers to play it against c4 rather than d4 because he doesn't like this move. I could have followed up here with e4, so maybe that's the most principled way. If you've started with d4 and your opponent goes for the English defense, you can follow up with e4, and it looks like this is a pretty good line for white. You get to keep these pawns in the center. And, he might try to chip away at this later with f5, but it's not going to be so easy. And it looks like c5 is an idea here. Interesting. Anyway, it still seems to be playable, but maybe not as good as the lines that Chess Explained prefers. Anyway, in this game, I didn't go e4. I went c4. Just going for a typical kind of queen's pawn opening. And so let's see, the chess engine likes e6 here, or the opening book likes e6 and knight f6, but he just continued with bishop b7, the main idea, and I go e3, and we're just completely out of the book at this point. I could still continue with knight c3 and try and get in that e4 move, but after knight c3 now black can respond with knight f6. And so I'm going to get into some kind of similar position after I develop the knights. I'll play e3. So, it's not like white has got a bad position after this. It's just not the most active way for white to set up. And so black should have a decent game at this point. Now he could continue with e6, going with this typical kind of setup and play f5 later. But instead, he went with g6. And at this point, we're just out of the opening book. And I think playing a double fianchetto is really kind of pushing it. You have to be careful when you're playing a defense like with black and you're giving your opponent all this space in the center. It's easy to get squashed, and you can get into positions where you can't. You have trouble coming back from it. Of course, there are ideas for black in these kind of positions. Usually it has to do with getting a few pieces out and then finding some pawn thrusts that will weaken the center. But that all has to be played very carefully, and it has to be timed. Anyway, we're just out of the opening book at this point. I continued with knight f3. He went bishop g7. Yeah, once again, f5 is preferred by the chess engine. Let's go bishop e2. He played e6. So he has created these dark squared weaknesses, although he's got this bishop here to defend it. But that makes this following sequence a bit puzzling. I castle, he plays knight e7, and I went knight e5. Now it turns out knight e5 was not the greatest move here. The chess engine says I should just keep developing, and I have a comfortable edge here. I just have more space in the center. So the chess engine prefers white quite a bit at this position. After knight e5, it's not so sure. And, well, one point is that black could just play d6 here, and the knight doesn't have any good follow-up. It just goes back, I guess. So knight e5 was not really a well-considered move, but it turned good. It turned good for me when he decided to take it. So this is a decision I say is puzzling because black has played these pawns on the light squares, created weaknesses on the dark squares, and now he trades off the defender of the dark squares, this bishop. And although it gives me doubled pawns, I mean, these pawns are quite useful in the center, controlling these dark squares. So black is actually in trouble after this. So although maybe not yet losing. We'll see. It takes a couple of bad moves to lose. But anyway, that was a start. Let's see. He castled. I played f4 right away. There were probably more active ways to continue. I think developing was recommended by the chess engine once again. And then bishop e4. And after bishop e4, the chess engine is starting to indicate that white has a winning advantage here. So it gives a evaluation of more than +2 in white's favor, which is pretty extreme considering the material is even. And the only kind of material edge I have is I have the bishop pair. But in terms of a positional edge, I've got all this control in the center, and he's just given me a development edge by playing this move, because I can immediately play knight c3, which is the best response there, and kick his bishop back. So I wasted some moves in the opening, but now black is wasting some moves too, and also black failed to take advantage of my knight e5 move when he could have kicked my piece back and gained something like equality. So here I was wondering about the move e4. It is possible to play it, and the chess engine in fact confirms that's the best move. I was kind of waiting for him to play a move like knight to f5. It figured that it seemed like that was his idea, and then I could kick it. But there's no harm in playing it right away, apparently. So that's the best move. This is a bit slow here. Let's see. He does go knight f5, and now I decide to kick it with the g-pawn, which is interesting. I mean, I saw that e4, the move I had planned, allowed knight to d4, hitting my bishop, and I wasn't sure if I wanted this trade. But, well, the chess engine is not impressed. It just goes bishop to g4 here. And this knight is in a little bit of trouble. It's going to have some problems finding squares to retreat to. The chess engine recommends the move bishop to b7. I guess it gives this square for the knight. And then after bishop e3, retreating. The other option was playing the pawn up to defend it, but that just loses a pawn. But after retreating, again, this is a position. Actually, it's up to +3 in white's favor at this point, even though the material is still even. So it's just kind of a positional squash, which is what you have to watch out for when you're playing these laid back openings as black. These slow developing openings. Lots of pawn moves, all in the first or second and third ranks. Hasn't really challenged the center, and his pieces are getting kicked back too. So I think a computer or a strong chess player would be able to just win from a position like this without any difficulty. Of course, at my level, I'm still prone to making mistakes. So anyway, g4 was not a bad move either, even though I could have played e4 and maybe that was better. But it has a similar effect. It kicks the knight back. Doesn't give him this knight d4 option, which, as it turns out, was not any good in any case. So he runs with his knight to g7, and I start bringing my bishop over to the king side. It's all well enough to enjoy this space advantage, but you have to figure you have to ask yourself, how are you going to win this game? And my idea is to bring my pieces over here to the king side and push through and open up an attack on his king, while his pieces are still away on the queen side. So I'm just trying to move my forces in that direction. Also, this piece, the dark squared bishop, is sometimes a bit difficult to activate when these pawns are all on dark squares. So it seemed like a good piece to bring around. Anyway, he played knight a6, trying to get his other knight into the game. Went with bishop g3. Couldn't go to h4 because the queen's still guarding that square. And he brought his knight to c5. Now, this isn't yet losing material. I have to set up a couple moves before that knight. I play a couple moves before that knight gets into trouble. And so queen c2 is actually a key move here. I played it not with the intention of trapping the knight, but just with the idea of keeping that knight from coming forward, because I saw the knight could hop into the e4 square. Now I've got that under control, and the knight has nowhere to go but back. And already I am thinking about playing b4 here. Let's see. And, maybe he's thinking about giving the knight a square. So if he played f5 here, And if I allow that to stand, then you know, he can maybe hop his knight into this square. But of course I can take en passant, and I do. The chess engine here recommends a5. That's another way of securing this square for the knight, and it's the kind of move I often play. I think it's a good move here. Although black, of course, is still in trouble. But, I mean, he still has the worst position. But he could at least secure that knight on the c5 square for the moment with a move like a5. But instead he played f5. And so now I can't attack the knight just yet, but I can take en passant, and once again that knight will have no squares to go forward. And then I played b4, and so that was really my first opportunity. I was kind of wondering if I had a chance to get that move in sooner, but this really was the first time I had to play that, first opportunity I had to play that move when it was really effective. And I didn't understand how strong it was at first, but since it was taking so long to find a reply, I eventually figured it out. The problem is if the knight goes back to b7 here, I push on with b5, and this bishop has no squares. All these squares are covered. So, and his retreat is blocked. So, yeah, once again, it's the lack of space for black's pieces has really landed him in hot water, and it's an example of why you have to play carefully when you're playing these kind of openings, and you know, look for those moments when you can break in the center and give yourself a little more space. Anyway, so instead of going back to b7, he went to a6, but that doesn't work either. I thought for a second he might have something when he found this nice move, knight b5. Gets his knight away from the pawn with tempo, but the knight unfortunately is loose there as well. So it's just he decided to save his bishop and give up his knight. And so I'm just winning from this point on. So I guess, yeah, f5 was actually the losing move, technically speaking, because he still had a way to save his knight with a5. But he was already in bad shape at that point. Anyway, there's a couple of interesting points, so let's move forward in the game. Nothing really terrible happens here. Let's see, I played queen e7. Oh, he played queen e7 here. He could have tried h takes g4, but this isn't any good because of rook takes d7. Yeah, I had that counterattack on the pawn there, so queen e7 was as good a move as any here. And now I went bishop f3 with the trade. Now bishop f3 was not the best move. The chess engine is recommending queen c2 here, getting the queen back to where it's looking at this loose pawn over on the king side. Just shifting my focus to the king side attack that I wanted to get earlier. That makes a lot of sense. Anyway, I decided to shut down the bishop on the long diagonal. This does lose a pawn here. After taking, he could have just taken on g4. I'm not sure why he didn't do that. I mean, it's still winning for white. I'm still a piece up, and he has no big follow-through here. But, well, it's a pawn. You know, these comebacks have to start somewhere. Probably I'm going to double on the d file, bring my queen back, looking at this pawn, those kind of moves. It's a great attack, and I'm a piece up. Anyway, instead he played h4, kicking my bishop back. His pawn's defended by his queen there. And then he played g5. So that's interesting, but I'm not sure what it accomplishes. This pawn is not going to live here very long. For the moment, I guess he's taking advantage of the pin here, so I can't just take that pawn right away, but I can pile up on it with knight e4, which turns out the chess engine approves that move. That was the best move here. He takes, I take, and then he plays d5, still trying to... Oh, no, he didn't play e5. He played d5, kicking my knight. Let's see, so we get one more exchange. Oh, I thought he was just going to take back here, hitting my knight, which is loose. It's doubly attacked. But the knight has a good square on g5, so I guess it's okay. He can quick kick my queen. I'll go queen c2. I mean, you know, why not try and get some play with these pawns? But my pieces are, in the meantime, focusing on his king side, and this pawn is loose too. This pawn is loose. So anyway, that doesn't save him, but it's kind of curious that he didn't just take back there. Instead, he played rook a to d8. And I pushed on with d6, another move that the chess engine approves of. You know, there's no, if we look at this position after the exchange and I move my knight away, it's opened up a file for his queen. You know, there's potential, if I'm not careful, of black getting some counterplay. So this move just, let's see, he went rook a8. This move, when I push the pawn forward, well, it creates a passed pawn for one thing, but it also keeps this file shut, so his queen is not exerting any pressure on my pieces back here anymore, or there's no more threat to invade there. Let's see, he went queen d7. The pawn is hitting the queen, and I played the move bishop c3. I had spotted this idea of knight to f6 with a fork, and I was trying to find the best way to take advantage of it. It looked like I could just win the exchange by supporting my knight on that square. But actually, well, even better, I should say, this has the same idea. I could have just taken the h-pawn. His queen, if we back up, his queen had been defending the h-pawn, which was what kicked my bishop back. When I pushed the pawn forward, it took his queen away from the h-pawn, so I could just take it. And it still supports knight to c3. I mean, knight to f6. I still have that fork idea here. So that would have been even more effective. Bishop c3 is winning too, so this is fine. Let's see, he went king h7, which doesn't really get away from the fork, but there was no good solution here. Let's see, I play it, and so I win the exchange here. And then let's go on a few more moves. Just pretty normal stuff here. What I was looking at here, yeah, let's back up. What I was looking at here is this pawn was loose on g4 for a long time, and you know, well, let's start with this exchange here that I played. It's not loose in this position because the queen, you know, the queen had just moved from e7 to d7, and this pawn was always here blocking the queen's view of g4. So there's no attack on g4 at this point. And as we go forward, there's still no attack on g4. But right here, when he played e5, this is the first point where the queen is now looking at this pawn. But and I didn't notice that right away. But it's an interesting check at this point. If he could check, he could win my bishop. Maybe he could get back into the game. But the moves I played just somewhat by coincidence. Well, I mean, they're the best moves, but I was playing moves that check the king. I was trying to get my queen back into the game. I hadn't even spotted this idea of queen takes g4, but I'm saved by the fact that I'm making moves with check. He went to g8. I play here with check, and he went knight to e6. And now he's blocked the checks, but he's also blocked his queen's view of g4, so that pawn is not hanging anymore, and so I have time to take here. And now he plays knight d4. And knight d4 once again opens up the attack of the queen on the g-pawn, but now his king is on the g-file, so I have a counter. Let's see. So I took here, and he took back with the pawn. If he tries it here, I just wanted to show this idea. I mentioned it during the game. He can check me and attack my bishop, but I have rook to g3, pinning the queen, and so he doesn't get to reap the benefits of his check. So he might as well take my rook. He did. I took back. The chess engine says actually bishop e7 right here is even stronger. I play that move in a little bit. Let's see, I take here. He played queen takes b5. Hadn't noticed that was hanging either. I've been overlooking things in my games recently, but well, I did okay in this one, I guess. I play bishop e7 now. It's defending the pawn, attacking his rook, and the checks here are harmless. So we can just go forward now. He chases me a little bit and then moves his rook, and then he gives up the back rank, so I get the queen. And then in this position, after I get my king away from the checks, he doesn't have any follow-up. His rook is pinned, and in fact, the chess engine says there's a mate in 4 here, so there's really no way out. If he comes back to defend, you know, I can just trade everything off, and I'll be up a queen plus these advanced pawns. So pretty easy win. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time. Bye now.